Switzerland on the brink of explosion. Iran gives the United States an ultimatum. Stop Israel, or the agreement will collapse. The Revolutionary Guards in Iran are using the Hezbollah terrorist organization to control the negotiations. In Israel, they are determined to increase the pressure on Hezbollah. The IDF is standing firm in southern Lebanon and continuing the fight against the terrorist organization. In the army, they are already talking about deepening the operation up to the Saluki, and the Litani Vance is still. And this is what's happening in Lebanon, while Vance, the Vice President of the United States, is still in Switzerland. The Iranians have left, and we will bring you all the updates from the talks and also the silence in Israel surrounding the move. Iran is trying to save what remains of the military power, but Trump is not giving up on dismantling Hezbollah, and he's changing his course of action. Has Hezbollah in Lebanon reached the end of its road? The organization has lost popular and political backing, supply routes, and military power, while Iran itself is trying to survive. We will not forget to bring you a review of the secret Hezbollah tunnel that has now been exposed. And of course, we will bring you the summary of the first day of the Iran-United States talks. How will the sides establish communication channels to prevent incidents in Hormuz? How will they try to prevent an eruption in Lebanon? And has the 60-day clock already started ticking? The talks with Iran have begun, and we are here to bring you the full truth about every development. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is June 22nd, so let's begin. The real drama of the last few days is not taking place in Tehran, in Jerusalem, or in Washington. It's taking place in Switzerland. There, far from the cameras, the real power struggle is now taking place over the future of the Middle East, and also over the fate of the agreement that Trump surprised the world by signing in Versailles, bringing it into effect even before the official negotiations were completed. The Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, who estimated that he would remain in Switzerland for a day or two for talks with Iran, has still not left the resort. But in Iran, it was reported this morning that the senior Iranian official Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Abbas Araghchi have left the palace. The talks between the sides are supposed to continue today, but they're expected to deal mainly with the technical matters. An American diplomat claimed that in the last night's talks, progress was made on several fronts, Lebanon and the Strait of Hormuz. From last night's talks in Switzerland came two central mechanisms, Qatar and Pakistan. The mediators in the talks announced that Washington and Tehran will establish a communication line to manage the incidents in the Strait of Hormuz. Opening the strait was one of the central goals of the United States in the Memorandum of Understanding with Tehran. And according to the Pakistanians and the Qataris, the line is intended to prevent incidents and miscommunications, and to create free passage for commercial vessels throughout the 60 days in which Memorandum of Understanding will remain in effect. The Iranians also received an achievement for their own in the form of a deconfliction cell in Lebanon. According to the Qataris and the Pakistanians, that cell will ensure the end of the military operations in Lebanon. But in this statement, the sides involved in the fighting in Lebanon were not mentioned at all. Israel and the Hezbollah terrorist organization were not mentioned. In Israel last night, they publicly rejected any demand for withdrawal from southern Lebanon. But since the publication of the announcement by Qatar and Pakistan, there has been silence amongst the senior officials in Jerusalem. This is another dictate that is imposed on Israel, which in practice is not a party to the talks at all. It's not clear how that cell is supposed to operate, but apparently it sounds like Israel will be required to receive instructions through the United States regarding its conduct in Lebanon according to Iran's demands. And now, I want to ask you, how can you talk about peace while Hezbollah has kidnapped all of Lebanon? Iran must be removed from this equation. The situation created here is almost unprecedented by any diplomatic standard. Yesterday, Iran announced the renewed closure of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important energy arteries in the world, and made clear that as far as it is concerned, it is impossible to talk about regional calm while the Israeli Air Force continues to strike with force in Lebanon. I will just remind you, the IDF is fighting the murderous Hezbollah terrorist organization, and now Trump is sending a direct threat to Tehran. In a dramatic escalation from Washington, Donald Trump published this evening a direct, sharp, and extraordinary threat against the Islamic Republic of Iran. In a statement that he published on his social media network, Trump demanded that Iran's leadership immediately restrain its terrorist proxies in Lebanon and made clear that continued activities would lead to an American military response far harsher than what Tehran experienced only recently. He said that Iran must immediately stop the activity of its highly paid proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble. If they do not, we will hit Iran very hard again. Exactly as we did last week, only harder. Trump's post caused a major storm online, and within minutes, it was published in media outlets around the world. It sets a clear red line against the Iranian involvement in the fighting in Lebanon. So what is really happening inside Lebanon? Look, from the ground, the IDF's original plan at the beginning of the fighting against the Hezbollah terrorist organization included the capture of areas in southern Lebanon at varying distances from the Israeli border. This is in order to prevent direct fire attacks on Israeli communities and to eliminate any possibility of terrorist infiltration into the territory of the State of Israel. But following Hezbollah's non-stop aggression, the IDF evacuated villages from their Lebanese population and is currently preventing their return in order to allow the process to operate freely to locate terrorist infrastructure and destroy it. Entire villages were completely destroyed so that the buildings would not become positions for Hezbollah anti-tank and sniper cells or departure points for raids. In practice, Hezbollah repeated and retreated backwards, and the IDF succeeded in maneuvering up to 10 kilometers from the Israeli border. The forces reached Hezbollah's sanctuary cities, which were dug with Iranian assistance underground, and over the years became sites that are relatively immune to IDF airstrikes. In addition, IDF forces reached Ras El Baida and Buford and the Ali Tahani Ridge, and they're facing towards the Nabtia area in order to continue destroying terrorist infrastructure. The original idea was position along the yellow line and establish a chain of outposts where the IDF protects the Israeli home front from inside Lebanese territory. But in practice, Hezbollah began launching explosive drones, unmanned aircrafts carrying explosives, rockets, and mortar shells towards the forces. Hezbollah's non-stop attacks forced the IDF to maneuver deeper into Lebanese territory and reach the Saluki and the Litani. And that's how we reach the situation that we are in right now. In practice, while Israel is negotiating with the government of Lebanon, the United States decided to move forward with a memorandum of understanding with Iran, which demanded that Hezbollah be included in the ceasefire agreement. This forced the IDF to avoid strikes in the Dahia neighborhood in Beirut, Lebanon, where Hezbollah's center is located. Bunkers, underground systems, headquarters, operations rooms, safe apartments, and more. Following the American demand, Beirut, in practice, received immunity from Israeli strikes. Now, the IDF continues to secure the yellow line and prevent the infiltration of terrorists and civilians southward into the areas under the Israeli operational control. And at the same time, IDF fighters continue to scan wide areas in order to locate terrorist infrastructure and to destroy it. When the forces identify immediate threats, they remove them, meaning they open fire. And right here, exactly in the place where Israel does not compromise for a moment on its self-defense, Trump's headaches begins. Despite the United States' initiative to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Islamic Republic of Iran, which also includes reference to Lebanon, it appears that this does not change the moves in the local arena. The assessments are that Washington is using several tools at the same time to try to dismantle Hezbollah's weapons. Within this framework, officials in President Donald Trump's administration pressured Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to stop the strikes in Lebanon out of concerns that they could harm the agreement with Tehran. At the same time, the United States imposed sanctions on Hezbollah allies, including Suleiman Frangidjeh, the head of the Marda movement, and applied pressure on the Syrian Authority to intervene in Lebanon. By the way, despite Trump's proposal to transfer the responsibility for dismantling Hezbollah's weapons to Syria, this evening the Syrian president rejected the idea outright. He made clear that Damascus may assist only in positive ways, not through war and not under Syrian sponsorships over Lebanon. And in Tehran, they're celebrating after the Switzerland talks. They are saying that Iran has become, against the will of the United States and Israel, part of the security framework in Lebanon. And against the background of the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran, Trump is intensifying his attack on Italy and on Giorgia Meloni, the head of Italy. He accuses Rome of enjoying American protection for years, but refusing to stand alongside Washington against the threat from Tehran. Then they are tested. When they are tested, they're not there, Trump said. So there's a lot ahead of us. So let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani. We are here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and about this war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And 1 second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible, click on the subscribe button, and most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts to get our look through our eyes of what it's like to live here in Israel under this war. Now, if you love TBN Israel and want to be part of what God is doing here in the land, we'd love to invite you to visit our official online store at shop.tbnisrael.com. There you can find exclusive TBN Israel merchandise that help you stay connected to what's happening here in the land of Israel and be part of the message coming out of Zion. This is one of the shirts that we have, the Boots on the Ground shirt. It's my favorite, but there are many shirts, as you can see on the screen next to me. We have also pillows, sweatshirts, hats, and all kinds of cool stuff that help us create more content from the land of Israel. Hey, that's me next to our studio in the background of Jerusalem. Anyway, it's good stuff. You can go there. You can help us create more content, more programs, more information coming out of Israel, and get something in return. A cool shirt and a cool merchandise. So that's a great way. Go to shop.tbnisrael.com. Make a stand for Israel. Help us create more content. Help us share the truth. And let's continue to share the news, because with us now is our Middle East senior correspondent, Mati Shoshani. And Mati, is Iran's real achievement in Switzerland not the lifting of sanctions, but the fact that the United States is beginning to manage Lebanon and Hormuz together with it, as if Tehran is the owner of both arenas?
The headlines we woke up to today, coming out of the marathon 18 hours of negotiation straight yesterday, where the top of the American government participate versus the top of the Iranian regime. We're talking, well, I should say this, the top of the public serving Iranian regime, not the IRGC, not the Ayatollahs, but the civil servants, those who are elected or chosen for their roles. When you look at that, you see VP Vance, you see, the son-in-law of the U.S. president, Jared Kushner there, working together with the mediators. And the outcome of that entire conversation, everything that happened there, is a conversation about Lebanon, is this vague, shapeless idea of some kind of supervising entity over what's happening in Lebanon, when the main topics of the conversation are not even on the table. And you have to just sort of shake your head for a second and ask yourself, what on earth is happening here? What is this bizarre freak show of a negotiation? What are they even talking about? How did Lebanon become the crux, the main point of a negotiation that is supposed to talk about opening up the Strait of Hormuz, removing nuclear capabilities, and stopping proxy warfare? Not only that, it gets even furthermore absurd, where in this conversation about bringing stability to Lebanon is not included the two sides fighting in Lebanon right now. The Hezbollah terrorist organization, that is the instigator of everything bad that's happening in Lebanon, and the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, that are fighting against the terrorist entity that embedded itself in our northern neighbor, Lebanon. How do we expect things to change if the Lebanese government that has up till now been unable completely, or possibly unwilling, or a combination of the two, to stop the Hezbollah terrorist organization? How are they, together with Iran, which is the entity behind Hezbollah that funds, triggers, pays, trains, and equips the terrorist organization, how are they going to bring stability to what's happening in Lebanon? And more than that, this seems like the biggest bait and switch that I've seen in years, where instead of actually talking about the main topics, someone shouted in the room and said, no, we're not talking about that today. First, we will talk about, I wish I had a strong Persian accent to mimic it. First, because I'm sure this didn't come from the American team. First, we'll talk about Lebanon. First, we'll talk about Hezbollah. Then we'll talk about what you want to talk about. What an absurdity. What a ridiculous show. What a catastrophe of a negotiation. And that's the nicest thing I can say about what happened in that negotiation in recent days. Not on the table, not discussed, not conversed, not fixed are the question of how do we prevent Iran from closing the Strait of Hormuz in an arbitrary fashion and from taxing ships as they plan to do? How do we know that the Iranians can actually uphold anything they commit to in these negotiations? Because they've proven without any shadow of doubt that the IRGC factions are the ones behind the scenes actually controlling the military actions that they carry out. How do we know that they're going to remove their nuclear capabilities at all, whether willingly or unwillingly? How do we know they're going to stop funding their proxies, which they've continued to do even in the crux, even in the midst of this ongoing conflict? Well, combine all of those things, and you understand that we're looking at a farcical situation. It is a joke of a negotiation. It is an absolute catastrophe when it comes to negotiating with the Iranians. And the show that happened yesterday, where the Iranians faked departing from it over offense, over the tweets made by President Trump during the negotiation, are just a show of how much this is, again, a charade of what should be a negotiation. It's more of the theater of negotiation carried out historically by the Iranian regime. That's what we were witnessing. And you look at that and you see that Iran has been successful at forcing the conversation away from what matters and towards a niche matter that they should not be even allowed to discuss. That's a reality. Think about it from this perspective. Think about this for a second. Iran is the exporter of terrorism. They paid, they trained, they equipped, and they pushed the attack button for Hezbollah against Israel. They used a terrorist organization funded externally to destabilize, to break, and even assassinate people within Lebanon proper. Then they used that same terrorist organization to fight against Israel. And now the instigator of all this violence, the instigator of all this instability is saying, no. We don't want to talk about the fact that we are a major disruptor to global trade. We don't want to talk about the fact that we launched thousands of missiles against our neighbors who did not attack us or even retaliate against us in any substantial way. That's the Gulf states. We don't want to talk about the fact that we're threatening to tax, that we're threatening to carry out nuclear attacks against the very countries that we're negotiating with right now. Let's talk about Lebanon, a country that we were the instigators of its destruction, its downfall, its suffering in recent decades. Not altogether, but definitely in the last 30 plus years, they are the main source of problems in that country. And they're saying, we talk about that first, we resolve that issue first, and let's deal with the biggest aggressor Israel, who's defending itself against the terrorists that we funded and created. And if that doesn't sound bizarre to you, please consult with a professional before you negotiate over anything in your life, because this is a bizarre situation that makes absolutely no sense. That's the best I can say about this. What I watched yesterday was a complete misunderstanding on behalf of the negotiating U.S. team, who were led to focus on the wrong issues, the ones that waste time, the ones that draw out this negotiation, the ones that are almost impossible to agree on, and came out with these bizarre declarations of the U.S. with Iran will dictate how we resolve the conflict in Lebanon, when Iran is the one funding the conflict and Israel is the one defending itself against the terrorists that Iran is funding in Lebanon. And if that doesn't sound confusing to you, well, it is confusing to me. And I'd say that this was a moment of success for Iranian negotiation tactics and a moment of failure for anything positive coming out of those negotiations. I can only hope that we see something better and more effective in the days to come.
And Mati, has Lebanon now become the first test of this agreement? And if so, is Israel being required to show restraint precisely at the moment when Hezbollah is under the greatest pressure on the ground?
Hey, let's talk about this whole idea for a second. Iran is trying to create an equation through which Israel is automatically the problem maker that needs to be solved or resolved or calmed down, because we are the ones, Israel is the one, causing trouble in Lebanon against Hezbollah. And I want to tell you something. I don't think the U.S. Was confused about what's actually happening. If you look at the tweets that came out, they're not really tweets, the Truth Social truths, whatever they're called, that were released by Trump yesterday during the negotiation. Let me tell you what the real backstory is. Here's the actual backstory. Trump is being updated live by the U.S. negotiation team. Have no doubt about that. And as he's being updated, he's being told by VP Vance and or Kushner and or Witkoff, he's been told the following. The Iranians refuse to talk about the important things. They're pushing the entire conversation to Lebanon. Trump comes out and essentially writes publicly, says, you know what? If this is the way you're negotiating, how about we go back to blowing up your country, Iran, and taxing ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz ourselves. The U.S. will do this at the expense of Iran. The Iranians feign offense. Oh no, Trump has blown up the negotiations. He's jeopardized this whole thing. We need to leave. We're so offended. Boo-hoo. They weren't really offended. They knew this was coming. And they did this, and the U.S. responded, knowing full well that Iran was trying to play a trick and not actually try to build anything towards a more substantial or meaningful negotiation or agreement. Why? Because Lebanon is a non-issue in the agreement with Iran and should remain a non-issue with it. And Trump's tweets, let's just call them that, his press releases that are done by him actually mimic or actually communicate the desires, the feelings, the zeitgeist of the American people or the American government at this time towards the Iranians. He understands that Israel has the right to defend itself in Lebanon. He says in one of the tweets he released yesterday in the afternoon, Israel time, U.S. morning time, one of the tweets was, you know what? Maybe Israel should be fighting even harder in Lebanon. Maybe Israel should be even more volatile. Maybe we should help Israel in fighting against Hezbollah. Why? Because Trump understands the absurdity of this. President Trump is not a fool and not fooled actively by what the Iranians are saying. He knows that there's no connection between what Iran is requesting and what really they need to have in this negotiation. All that said, the Iranians have been able to solidify an equation that is terribly problematic. And that equation is that Lebanon is being pulled into the negotiation with Iran as a crucial element in the conversation. And that's not good. That's not good on multiple different levels. Mainly, the main one of all of them is the fact that the assumption is that Israel needs to give in to some kind of demand by the Iranians, withdraw to some kind of defensive posture in Lebanon, cease fighting against Hezbollah, the terrorist organization, one way or another. And I need to say this from two different perspectives. There are two things happening here. One, Iran really has been able to pull this conversation to also include Lebanon and a ceasefire there. And I say this as an Israeli, for the Americans to demand that there's some kind of end to the conflict and fighting within Lebanon makes sense in the greater scheme of things. They should also be supportive of Israel's right to defend itself. And at least from President Trump, we hear that message from VP Vance, it's a little less clear, let's put it that way, a lot less clear, if we're being honest here for a second. But there's something else that needs to be addressed and talked about. Even from an Israeli perspective, there is no real end to the war in Lebanon that doesn't include a greater regional understanding. And let's be honest, Hezbollah is here to stay for the near future. Israel does not have the desire, forget the ability for a second, the desire to take over Lebanon all the way to the point where Hezbollah ceases to exist. And I don't know that such a reality exists. Let me walk you through that. We push Hezbollah north. Hezbollah continues to fire. They take their assets, their rockets, their drones. They flee a little farther north into the mountains. Israel progresses, Hezbollah withdraws, so on and so forth, all the way till northern Lebanon. I mean, there is no end to this. Does the Israeli armored forces, does the IDF want to hold on to half or 3/4 of the area controlled by Hezbollah in Lebanon, half of Lebanon? No, we have no desire to do such a thing. We've never declared an aspiration to do such a thing. And I encourage you to ignore the remarks made by extreme members of our government that don't reflect the desire of our government or the people in the country, only their desire for headlines. That's the reality. I'll help you read the Israeli news for just a second there. But setting that aside, setting the statements made by extreme factions and really what the goal is of the IDF, the goal of the IDF is to provide protection for the people of northern Israel. The goal of the IDF is to ensure that Hezbollah is not on the fence with Israel, attacking and jeopardizing our civilians. That's our goal. That is our aspiration here. And we only reach that goal by an agreement. And some of the things that were suggested yesterday of having some kind of pilot program where the Lebanese army is empowered, strengthened, equipped, who knows how it's actually going to work, to fight against Hezbollah, that is golden on behalf of Israel. That is beautiful from the perspective of Israel. We're happy to see that kind of solution materialize. We've been skeptical of it being successful because they've been unable and unwilling up till now, but we're happy to see them try. That's an understatement here. And to take that to the final sort of thought here, which is ultimately Israel will need to stop fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon and to withdraw to some kind of defensive line, be it on the Litani River sort of geographical line or elsewhere. That's sort of beside the point right now. Ultimately, the long-term solution is a regional project that rebuilds the Lebanese government and the Lebanese armed forces at the expense of Hezbollah and has them fight against Hezbollah. We're happy for that kind of solution, and that should be a clear understanding. But Iran should not be allowed to dictate what happens in Israel and whether or not Israel can defend itself against Hezbollah. And I need to tell you very clearly, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister of Defense Katz, have been vocal in the last 24 hours in saying that equation will never exist from the perspective of Israel. We will continue to fight against Hezbollah and never allow them, Hezbollah or Iran, to dictate whether or not Israel can decide if they want to defend itself against a terrorist attack. That's something that needs to be said clearly. And I say this regardless of what the U.S. says in these negotiations. Netanyahu was very careful yesterday in the words he used at a conference he was speaking at, but he made it quite clear. Israel will not allow Hezbollah to dictate the terms of what happens in Lebanon, and we definitely won't allow our sworn enemies, the Iranians, to dictate how we fight or defend ourselves in Lebanon. That's the simple reality, and I hope that the U.S. is more aggressive in detaching the conversation of Lebanon and Hezbollah from their negotiations with Iran.
Has Hormuz now turned from an arena of physical control into an arena of psychological control? Because it's enough for Iran to say that we closed it, even if the ships are still passing, in order to move markets, governments, and negotiations.
The Strait of Hormuz is this bigger problem here from different perspectives. One, it's visible, as in when the Strait of Hormuz is open, it's visible and easy to understand for everyone in the world. And it's a clear win for Iran if it's closed, and a clean win for the U.S. if it's open. And the problem is in asymmetrical warfare, which is the exact type of warfare we're fighting right now. Iran doesn't have to physically close the strait for people to think that it's closed. I'll give you an example. A couple days ago, Iran says, we're closing the straits. Why? Because Israel's fighting against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Some made up, drummed up, created, fabricated excuse, which was more power play within the Iranian regime than anything else, where the IRGC says, we refuse to accept the terms of this negotiation. There is no negotiation. We're closing the Strait of Hormuz. Well, guess what happened that day? That day, 55 ships traveled through the Strait of Hormuz. But you didn't hear that in the news because the Iranians said the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And look at it from this bigger scheme. Think about this. Does a company that's moving its ships through the Strait of Hormuz want to say, actually, that's not true. We actually do have ships traveling through the Strait of Hormuz? No. Why would they want to draw attention to the fact that they're traveling through the Strait of Hormuz? They don't. That's the simple answer. They don't want to draw attention to that fact. So they don't say anything, and the world believes that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And that's really the problem with this entire conversation. Iran is an asymmetrical warfare player. What does that mean? They're terrorists in plain language. They use intimidation and fear, terrorism, to try to affect the world around them. So they scare and they threaten and they attack and they look for the weakest point and they attack it, the slow ships, the countries that can't defend themselves, and they attack them and they use that as a way of influencing the United States. That's really the reality here. And I want to say something. Regardless of the outcome of these negotiations, there's a couple things that we learned. One, the Iranians can't be trusted. Whenever they say, yes, we're in agreement about the negotiation, it's just the beginning of the negotiation. They don't actually follow through when they say that there's a document that we're mostly agreeing on. They negotiate until the other side is willing to, throw everything away from frustration, and then they feign, oh, no, it was a big misunderstanding. We're actually in agreement with the United States. It's all good. Why are we fighting? We're all friends. We're all family here. They've done this countless times in recent months. Every time that the U.S. essentially is about to blow a gasket and say, is that too old of a reference, by the way? Do people still know what it means to? Micah, do you know what it means to blow a gasket? Okay, well, comment in the comments if you don't know what blowing a gasket means. I'll do another follow-up video explaining the mechanics of it. But anyway, when they're about to go ballistic, I just don't like that term because it's too related to the reality, and it's not enough detached from the reality of the war in the Middle East. Anyway, when the U.S. is about to go crazy and says, we've had enough of this negotiation, bam, let's attack the Iranians again, then the Iranians say, no, we're all good. And the Strait of Hormuz is exactly that. They play this careful game of seeing how far they can stretch the patience of the U.S., how much they can trick the mediators, how much they can attack and get away with it. And the Strait of Hormuz is exactly that. Every time that some things seem to be going forward, they suddenly throw everything away and they say, you know what, let's close the Strait of Hormuz. And then they pretend that they do it even though the ships are still traveling through. What do we learn from all of this? One, that the world is a confusing place. Two, that the Iranians cannot be trusted. Three, that the Iranian regime still does not speak in a single voice. And the people they send to negotiate in these fine hotels in Europe with the U.S. team, those people don't decide. The people who decide what happens in Iran in the Strait of Hormuz are the IRGC and the clerics who hide behind councils and regions and committees and names, like every evil bureaucrat loves to do and every evil dictator loves to do. They hide behind these committees and bureaus and boards of trustees, etc., and they make the decisions there. And more so, they have no plan of stabilizing. They have no plan of rebuilding. They never did. It's still on the flag. It's still on the banner. Destroy the big Satan, the U.S., destroy the small Satan, Israel, promote an agenda that is of a end times nature, 12th Shia, Imam kind of theology, talking about bringing the end of the world through which the Mahdi, the hidden Messiah of Shia Islam will appear through the torment, through the burning, through the violence that they will promote in the Middle East. That's their agenda. It's an agenda of power, an agenda of torture, an agenda of torment. And sadly, that's who we're negotiating. That's who the U.S. is negotiating with right now. And I want to remind everyone of the lessons we've learned in recent months. You only negotiate with Iran when they are on their knees afraid of decapitation. That's the only time you negotiate with them. You never give them wiggle room. You never allow them breathing room, because when you do, they use it against you time and time again. And look at the scenes and the analysis of what happened yesterday in the negotiation, an intentional, let's call it what it is, humiliation of the U.S. delegation, humiliation of VP Vance, intentional, not accidental, an intentional avoidance of any kind of photo op that would show progress with the U.S. team, and an intentional diversion of all the conversation towards something completely irrelevant to this conversation, which is Lebanon and Hezbollah. That's what they're trying to do. Why are they trying to do this? Because it just kicks the rock down to the next person, to the next day, and allows the regime to continue doing what they do, which is spreading torment and fear and violence throughout the Middle East. They have no grand plan to rebuild. They have no grand plan to bring prosperity to the people of Iran. That's not who they are. They are trying to bring death and destruction, and they've been so clear about it that we might as well start listening to them. And that's the reality. Where does this negotiation go from here? Yair, your bet is as good as mine. And by the way, you guys at home, your bet is as good as ours, because this is just going to continue until the U.S. gets strong enough, resolute enough to force a clear conversation that only deals with the important issues, be them nuclear, proxies, and the terror regime of the Iranian Ayatollahs. That's what we need to deal with, dismantling that mechanism. Forget all the fluff that they're throwing, forget all the distractions that they're throwing, deal with the basics, and then move on from there. And if Iran doesn't want to deal, we go back to military action against them, because that seems to be the only thing that works.
Thank you very much, Mati Shoshani. That definitely helped us better understand what we're dealing with. And to all of you, continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Go to our YouTube channel, TBN Israel, hit the subscribe button so you know what's going on. We report multiple times a day about what's happening in Israel. Also, look us up, Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani, on our social media accounts to see life in Israel through our eyes. In Majdal Zoun, about 10 kilometers inside Lebanon, the IDF uncovered one of Hezbollah's most sensitive assets. Not a small warehouse, not one shaft, an entire underground base. More than 200 meters of tunnels at a depth of more than 25 meters with 12 rooms, 4 launch shafts aimed towards Israel, drones, anti-tank missiles, explosive devices, and explosive materials. And here begins the big question of this report. If Hezbollah is really still strong, why is Iran insisting so hard on saving it through an agreement with the United States? Because what was uncovered in Majdal Zoun is not just another tactical target. It is a window into the method. This village in the western sector of southern Lebanon was for years a Hezbollah staging point, a place from which it was possible to control fire and observation over parts of southern Lebanon and parts of northern Israel, a place from which came fire, surveillance, preparations for raids, and combat systems built with Iranian patience. Forces from the 551st Brigade Combat Team under Division 91 entered there on foot after airstrikes and prolonged intelligence gathering. From the air, you can strike, but in order to understand what Hezbollah really built, you have to go underground. And there, in the belly of the village, the picture was revealed. Blast doors, reinforced rooms, wide corridors, dozens of dismantled drones, bodies and wings, arranged like an assembly line, Iranian weapons, heavy warheads, a system that resembles the missile tunnels that Iran shows in its propaganda videos. Not by coincidence. Hezbollah did not build this alone. This is not a local project of the Lebanese village. This is infrastructure built over years with Iranian money, knowledge, planning, and supply. And during the operation there, more than 20 Hezbollah terrorists were eliminated. About 10 of them belonged to the Radwan force. In addition, more than 50 terror infrastructures were destroyed, including observation posts, weapons warehouses, and operational facilities. This explains why Iran is under pressure, because every time the IDF exposes another tunnel, another drone base, another command room, and another launch shaft, it is not only hitting Hezbollah, it is peeling away another layer of Iran's investment in Lebanon. And in Tehran, they understand very well, if this pace continues, Hezbollah will not remain the same Hezbollah. It may continue to talk, it may continue to threaten, it may continue to issue statements, but its military structure in southern Lebanon is being eroded. And that's exactly what the former senior official from the Gulf, former Kuwaiti information minister, Saad bin Tafala al-Ajmi, said. In a sharp column published in the Arab World, he argued that Hezbollah in Lebanon has reached the end of its political, military, and regional road. He recalled the famous sentence by Hassan Nasrallah before he was eliminating, Everything we eat and drink, our weapons and our missiles, are from Iran. And we say this openly. El-Ajami argues that this very existence exposes Hezbollah's central weaknesses, dependencies on Tehran. In the past, that dependency was a source of strength. Iran gave money, missiles, drones, training, smuggling routes, diplomatic cover, and ideological protection. Today, that same dependence is becoming a burden. Iran itself has been hit. The supply routes through Syria have changed. The Syria today is not Assad's Syria. Ports are under supervision. Iranian flights to Beirut are no longer as free as they once were. Suitcases of dollars do not arrive as easy. And inside Lebanon, the Shiite public in the south is paying a heavy price. Thousands of casualties, displaced people, destroyed homes, villages turned into combat zones, residents who understand that Hezbollah has dragged them once again into a war that it cannot finish. And here comes the turning point. Iran did not put Gaza at the center of the talks. Not Jerusalem, not the Palestinians. It insisted on Lebanon. Why? Because Lebanon is the asset it is trying to save. If Hezbollah falls, Iran loses its most important military arm against Israel. And if it weakens to the point where the Lebanese army, the American pressure, and the IDF operations reduce it together, the entire Iranian deterrence structure in the north will change. That's why in Switzerland, after 18 hours of talks, the mechanisms that the Iranians are celebrating was born. A deconfliction cell in Lebanon, a cell that is supposed to include the United States, Iran, Lebanon, Qatar, and Pakistan, but not Israel, and not Hezbollah. Think about the absurdity. The IDF is fighting Hezbollah. Hezbollah is firing at IDF forces. Israel is holding a security zone in order to defend the communities of the north. But the mechanism that is supposed to manage the friction is being created without Israel and with Iran inside the room. In Tehran, they are already presenting this as an achievement. Sources affiliated with the Revolutionary Guards claim that Iran has become, against the will of the United States and Israel, part of the security structure in Lebanon. And that's exactly the danger. Not only the release of the funds, not only oil, not only Hormuz. Iran is trying to receive official status in the area where it built the threat itself. And at the same time, a communication channel was also opened around the Strait of Hormuz. The official goal is to prevent incidents, misunderstandings, and danger to commercial ships. In practice, this is another mechanism in which Iran receives the ability to turn its threat into organized diplomatic language. It threatens to close the strait and then receive communication lines to prevent escalation. It activates Hezbollah and then enters a cell whose purpose is to prevent friction in Lebanon. This is not coincidence. This is a method of operation. Create a fire and then ask for a role in putting it out. Here, Trump is trying to signal that he's not giving up. He directly threatened Tehran and demanded that Iran immediately stop its proxies in Lebanon. He said that if they do not stop causing trouble, the United States will strike Iran again, harder. Senator Lindsey Graham, close to Trump, also sent a direct message to the Lebanese people. Help is on the way. Hezbollah has terrorized your country for a long time. This is about to end. The American message is clear on paper, but on the ground, Israel has already learned that statements are not enough. Because while Washington talks about dismantling Hezbollah, it is also pressuring Israel to stop strikes in Lebanon so as not to harm the agreement with Iran. While it imposes sanctions on Hezbollah allies, it is also creating a Lebanon mechanism in which Iran sits on the room and Israel does not. This is the new American policy, a strict on the one hand and break on the other. And at the same time, Washington also tries to bring Syria into the game. Trump said that Syria might be able to deal with Hezbollah better, but Syria's president, Ahmed el-Shara, cooled the enthusiasm very quickly. He said that Syria may help disarm Hezbollah, but not through war and not under Syrian guardianship over Lebanon. So in simple words, Damascus does not intend to enter the Lebanese mud, not for Trump. He also added an important point. Even if Israel and Lebanon sign an agreement, what happens if one missile is launched from Lebanon towards Israel the night after? What kind of peace is it if there is no one capable of enforcing this peace? And that's exactly the question that Israel is asking. Because peace on paper does not stop an explosive drone, and an international mechanism does not replace force on the ground. And just before we continue, it's important for us to say this to you as clearly as possible. If you want to truly understand this war, do not stay only with the headlines. Keep following boots on the ground. Share this report. Click the like. Write to us in the comment sections what you see, what you think, and subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel so that you never miss another update of what's happening here in Israel. And now we need to return to what's happening in southern Lebanon, because Hezbollah is not only defending tunnels, it's also studying the IDF. In Israel's defensive establishment, they assess that the organization has renewed its observation and intelligence collection systems along the yellow line. It is operating technological means, mainly at night, in order to identify radioactivity, commanders, movements, and signs that indicate the presence of senior command in the field. This is no longer only statistical fire. Hezbollah is looking for high-value targets. The recent incidents are setting off red lights. A former commander of the 401st Brigade was seriously wounded by a drone strike. The deputy commander of Division 36 was hit by an explosive device. The commander of Battalion 32, Lieutenant Colonel Dor Ben Shimon, was killed together with 3 soldiers in a tank in southern Lebanon. The initial investigation raised suspicion of a combination of an explosive drone, an anti-tank warhead, or a mortar shell that hit the tank and caused a severe fire. The attack burned for hours because of the ammunition inside of it, and at first it was not possible to approach it. This teaches us that Hezbollah is still very dangerous. Weaker, yes. More worn down, yes, but not paralyzed. It's trying to compensate for the loss of infrastructure through intelligence, drones, observation, and deep familiarity with the terrain. It understands that it cannot always hold lines as it once did. So it looks for the commander, for the tank, for the command convoy, the moment when an Israeli force steps out of routine. That's exactly why Israel cannot leave southern Lebanon too quickly. The IDF is there to prevent direct fire on the communities of the north, to prevent infiltrations, to expose infrastructure, and to dismantle the staging areas that were built for years. If Israel leaves before the threat is dismantled, Hezbollah will return to the tunnels, to the villages, to the positions, and to the shafts. And then all of this will go back to the same starting point, only with more Iranian confidence. Israel is already prepared for the possibility of pilot programs with the Lebanese army, areas where the Lebanese army will be required to prove that it can clear territory of Hezbollah, not in words, not in statements, with maps, searches, weapon seizures, and preventing terrorists from returning. If that happens, it could be an important test, but there must be no confusion. The Lebanese army can receive an opportunity. Hezbollah cannot receive immunity. And the problem is that Beirut, Washington, Damascus, and Tehran all want something different now. Lebanon wants to stop being destroyed. Washington wants to stabilize the agreement. Damascus wants to avoid being dragged into a new war. Tehran wants to save Hezbollah. And Israel wants one thing: for the residents of the north to be able to return home without Radwan's cell waiting for them beyond the fence. And meanwhile, the international arena is also becoming more complicated. Trump attacked Italy and Giorgia Meloni, claiming that Rome has enjoyed American protection for years, but does not stand with Washington against the Iranian threat. He was angry at a longtime ally, exactly while he's trying to reach understandings with an adversary like Iran. And this is part of the strategic confusion that we see in the world today. Allies are reprimanded. Rivals receive negotiations rooms. Israel is required to show restraint. Iran receives mechanisms. Hezbollah is under pressure, but is still trying to exact the price. Even in the air arena, Iran is looking for signs of recovery. There are reports that they are examining the purchase of use of J-10B fighter jets from China after delays in the supply of Su-35 aircrafts from Russia. There's no official confirmation for China or from Iran about this deal, but the very discussion of it points to an urgent need. Iran's air force is aging, and the regime is looking for a way to close the gaps quickly. This is another sign of what's happening to Tehran. Iran is not standing calmly at the head of the strong axis. It is observing blows, improvising, looking for aircrafts, looking for money, looking for mechanisms, and trying to present every retreat as an achievement. And that is why it is holding on to Hezbollah. Because if Hezbollah breaks, the entire story of the axis of resistance begins to crack before our eyes. If Hezbollah has lost a large part of its command, its warehouses, its drones, its routes, and its political cover in Lebanon, then Iran loses its main lever of pressure against Israel. And if Israel succeeds in proving that southern Lebanon is no longer the Iranian immunity territory, that will also affect Syria, Iraq, Gaza, Yemen, and the Gulf. That's why the battle over Majdal Zoun is not only a battle over a tunnel, it is a battle over who determines the reality in Lebanon. An IDF force on the ground or an international mechanism in which Iran sits and tries to save what remains of Hezbollah. The Iranians can celebrate in Switzerland, but in Majdal Zoun, the truth was revealed. Hezbollah built a fortress underground for 20 years. You can see the images next to me. The IDF reached it. And if that is what was found in one village, what else is hidden beneath the village that Hezbollah is still trying to protect? Let me know what you think in the comments. Should Israel let a terrorist organization, let me rephrase that even, would you let a terrorist organization grow stronger on your border? Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Keep spreading the truth. Follow us, hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel YouTube channel. Make sure to look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media accounts, and keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Shalom from Israel. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.